One. Okay, so I'm Professor Kyle Edens at Richland College, and I want to welcome everybody to our discussion forum, an online outreach forum today. Our title for this discussion forum is Connections Between Learning and Food. And so in our honors class at Richland, our honors class is connected to psychology. So everything that we're doing this semester is relating psychological principles, studies, and findings to food, which is actually quite easy to do since much of psychology has an intimate connection with food, and many of the basic principles of learning were initially studied by using food as a tool. And so that's what we're going to do today. We're going to kind of understand that intimate connection, and we're also going to do this in an effort to serve our learning center and to serve Vickery Meadow Food Pantry and City Square. So Vickery Meadow, the Learning Center, and City Square have all been involved in the process, and we actually have some people here with us today from City Square, and we look forward to hearing from them near the end of our presentation. So thank you all for joining us today. We hope you enjoy our presentation on connections between learning and food. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to define learning. So what is learning? Um, it's been defined in many ways, and most people think of learning as in an educational setting, right? So learning in modernity has become very cognitive. We're very focused on that very cerebral, very intellectual learning that occurs in the classroom. However, when we started studying learning from a psychological perspective, learning was very much about behavioral change. So whenever we saw a behavioral change, we said, is that learning? And so there were some kind of defining rules about that. So one of the defining rules around if that behavioral change was learned or wasn't learned was whether or not it was due to maturation, so development. If it was due to development, then it wasn't learning. It was something else. It was a maturation process. If we saw a change in behavior that was due to fatigue or sensory adaptations, that's not learning either. I mean, the individual didn't learn to quit catching a baseball or running down a track just because their times are getting slower. They didn't forget those things. They just, they were fatigued, and so that's not learning. So learning is a behavioral change that's not due to maturation, sensory adaptation, fatigue, and we also need to consider the drugs. So is learning, if we're responding at higher rates, is that because of the caffeine that we took this morning in our coffee or in our drinks, or is that really learning? The answer to that was no. That's not learning. That's a product. It's a behavioral change, but it's a product of the drug. And so we want to understand learning as being a product of consequences and associated mechanisms, and then we're going to start transitioning more towards some of those cognitive components of learning. And there are also some neurological components that we're not going to discuss in here in any detail. For example, like long-term potentiation, where actual neurons, cells in the brain are actually becoming more intimately connected. And we're not going to discuss that in here, but it certainly is a product of learning. So I want to make you all aware of those things. Before I turn it over to the students, how might you define learning? So I would like to hear from the audience just briefly of how some of you might define learning. And there is a microphone icon at the bottom of the screen, so feel free to click on it and let us know what you now think of learning after hearing a more psychological definition of learning. So, Melanie, go ahead and let us know. What are you guys thinking?
Well, first of all, good afternoon. I'm Melanie.
My name is Emily.
Gemma.
Lewis.
And Estrella's here too.
Hi, guys. Welcome. And thank you all for joining us today.
Um, yeah. So we define learning as
I feel like learning is more of like acquiring new behaviors, and it's not just like learning like in a classroom setting, like you said. And I think like learning is just about like changing our behavior and acquiring new skills. And I feel like we only learn that through experience, and it's not something that can just be taught.
Interesting. So it's not something that I can just tell you, hey, this is the definition of this thing, right? It's something that you actually have to work with, right? You actually have to practice in some way with that knowledge. Is that kind of what you're saying, Emily?
Yeah, like when you are trying to learn something, it's not like a one-time behavior. Like it's something that has to occur a numerous amount of times in order for you to actually learn it.
I think I understand. So there's some repetition involved. Does anybody else like Lewis or Melanie or Estrella, do you guys have any other insights you want to add to our definition of learning, or are you guys ready to move on?
I think we all agree with what Emily say. Also like I guess that the way you learn in school is also pretty repetitive. Like for example, if you're trying to get a mathematical formula, the way you try to grasp that knowledge is to practice the formula several times for you to um, capture it and once you and be ready for it for a test.
Think I get it. So the schools aren't getting it completely wrong, right? There's still like some repetition, and we have labs, and we have interesting things like online forum discussions, right? Like this, where you guys get to come in here and kind of, reflect upon what you know and try to elaborate and offer some novel product for our community. So I think I kind of better understand this basic definition of learning that involves some sort of behavior change, some new skill, maybe some creative output that was built upon from some other foundational behaviors. So yeah, and it involves some repetition and practice and experience. So I think I kind of get it. So are you guys ready to move on to our next question and topic?
Yes.
All right. So now this is an interesting question because we all think we know the answer to this question. And maybe in our personal lives we do, but really let's think broadly about this, and let's reflect upon our discussions with Janie from Vickery Meadow. And I also want to offer you guys one other thing to consider. There's actually an eating disorder that involves eating items that aren't food and can't be digested. That eating disorder is called pica, and so people will actually eat like like sand and rocks and other things, like for example like hair or paint chips or dirt, and we really wouldn't consider that food. Um, in most cases, but for somebody with pica, they do. So I'm kind of interested in this concept of food. So I'll turn it over to the students and anybody else in the audience. What is food? How should we define it?
So, food is a basic psychological need such as like air, water, shelter, sleep, clothing, and reproduction. And it's actually in the hierarchy of needs of by Maslow. It's like in the lowest and the last level of the pyramid.
And it's one of the first things you need to complete before you can go on to the next need. You can't go above it before you need to satisfy the psychological need.
Correction, physiological needs. We're sorry for that.
No worries. That you misspoke. That happens all the time, so no big deal. And you caught it. You corrected it. But like, so what would we consider food? So like, is sand food? Would we consider like a durian food?
I think
Um,
food is like anything that's edible and can be. Also, this is Lulu. Sorry. um, Edible that you can eat and it can give your body nutrition. What can like sustain you throughout the day to get your daily tasks, to get your organs moving and stuff like that. That's what I consider food to be.
Thank you, Lou. Thank you. Students, would you like to reply to Lou?
I definitely agree that food, like, we don't consider stuff like sand and like dirt food because it doesn't provide us nutritional, like our nutritional values and needs. Like maybe for certain animals that's okay, but in our like our realm, we don't consider it food because it's not, and it's not something that we connect to emotionally and psychologically. Like when we look at like certain things like dirt, we're disgusted by it. We wouldn't think about eating dirt. And like durians, even though that is food, most people wouldn't consider that like edible. So I feel like food is, it's still the person's like preference. It's you can't define it specifically because to everybody like different things are considered edible and food.
Very interesting. So I noticed that you mentioned like the animals. So some animals like some dirt or some of those objects and things that we would consider definitely aren't food for us, may be food for them, and maybe they're able to absorb some sort of like micronutrient or mineral from that. But for us, we don't really see those things as food. So I'm kind of interested, and if Meredith and Alexis are still with us, how might City Square define food?
I think I don't know if this is exactly the answer you're looking for. I think from our viewpoint and the work we do, one thing that we consider food is a basic human right. Everyone should have the right to food. It's necessary. Like nutritious food is necessary for everything. It's so one of the students mentioned the hierarchy of needs. And I think that's a great starting point. It's something you need before anything else. If you don't have access to enough sufficient nutritious food, you can't learn, you can't work, you really can't even put forward any energy on anything.
Okay, thank you, Meredith and Alexis, for that understanding of how City Square views food and our need for it. If we don't have it, right, we can't go and do the other things that we really find to be very human. And that's one of the things that I think we're going to see today when we start talking about basic principles of learning and how they were discovered using food as a tool. And one of our concerns as psychologists over our history became, is psychology becoming the study of behavior when animals are deprived of some food? Because oftentimes what would happen in these studies that we're going to see is the animals would be deprived of food for a period of time that would eventually lead to body weight reduction, so that they were 70 to 80% of their normal satiated body weight. And so when it becomes the case that the only thing you care about is food, right, because you're malnourished or you're undernourished, then a lot of things start to look like food, and it becomes your primary concern. And that kind of weighs into that basic physiological level. And we're going to see how that relates to our studies. So I'll go ahead and segue into our first study, where the animals actually were satiated, but we wanted to kind of understand the basic mechanisms of learning. And this is called classical conditioning. So let's go ahead and introduce Ivan Pavlov. Students, who was Ivan Pavlov?
Ivan Pavlov is a Russian physiologist in the 1890s. He was studying the digestive system of dogs, and he had lab techs who regularly fed him, and he realized that when they brought him food, the dog started salivating just when the lab techs came and not even with food, which led him to discovering classical conditioning, which is a neutral stimulus becomes associated with a stimulus that naturally produces a behavior.
Very good. So Ivan Pavlov was using food to understand like gastrointestinal responses, and salivation is that first one. And so I'm not really understanding though this neutral stimulus and unconditioned stimulus and some of these terms you use. So can you describe classical conditioning for me in a little bit more detail and define like an unconditioned stimulus, an unconditioned response, neutral stimulus, a conditioned stimulus, and a conditioned response? And could you use food maybe in your example so we can kind of understand how these basic associations form?
Sure. So you have the unconditioned stimulus, which in this case is the dog food. And then you have the unconditioned response, which is a natural response to the food, which is the dog salivating. And then the neutral stimulus doesn't have any response. It's in this case, he does a bell. So it's not going to have any response but for conditioning. And then you have the unconditioned response, which is doing the neutral stimulus plus the unconditioned response to make a conditioned response, which is the bell. Every time the bell rings, the dog is going to salivate.
Hey, so the unconditioned stimulus was food. That makes sense that we would automatically have a response to food, especially if we're starting to get a little hungry. And then the neutral stimulus of a bell, are you saying it's neutral because it didn't yield a salivatory response?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm kind of getting it. And then we want to take that neutral stimulus, and what are we pairing it with again?
With the unconditioned response.
The unconditioned response or the unconditioned stimulus?
Oh, the unconditioned stimulus, sorry.
Oh, okay. So we're taking the bell and we're pairing it with the food,
Mm-hmm.
right? And then we're getting a response that's salivation. And if we do this a number of times, we can then remove the food. And what can we do next? Can we like does the bell then lead to salivation or?
After conditioning, the bell would lead to the conditioned response salivating.
Oh, okay. So are you telling me like essentially like a sign at a restaurant or some form of symbol or marketing that indicates a place where there might be food? If a person has you know been a patron there long enough and eaten enough of their food that they might come to like salivate and really feel warmth toward that symbol?
Mm-hmm. Just like thinking about it can make a person salivate.
So then it gets represented in our memories, right? So when we think about like I don't know, give me a symbol from a restaurant where you guys like to eat that is like really stands out to you and has become like a conditioned stimulus for you.
The M in McDonald's.
That's the classic one, like the Golden Arches, right? It's just like right there. It's very effective, very recognizable, and it's come to like represent their food. So yeah, if you eat at McDonald's, it might be something that really like pops out to you. Okay, so I'm kind of understanding this classical conditioning thing. When might that go awry, and when might we develop like an aversion the food, like taste aversion. So we're eating at like our favorite place, and then all of a sudden we're like we don't want to eat there anymore. How might that occur through like classical conditioning?
So let's say you eat at a restaurant and it makes you really sick and you get food poisoning from it, you're gonna associate it now with a negative uh a thing. So you're not gonna want to eat there anymore because now every time you think of it, you're gonna think of you getting sick and not feeling well.
Man, that doesn't sound like too much fun. I don't know if I so we have to be kind of careful, right? So when we're eating these foods that we like, we want to stay away from maybe eating our favorite foods when we're not feeling so well, because it could be that there are other associative mechanisms at work that could make it to where that food, and in particular the symbols that are connected to that food, because restaurants and I don't know. We need to ask City Square if they stamp their products with symbols. So yeah, I'm kind of curious about that. But those symbols, can come to arouse these kind of and evoke kind of these undesirable responses as well. So let me go ahead and present that question to Melanie or Meredith and Alexis. And so Meredith and Alexis, do you guys at City Square have like a symbol or a slogan or some sort of graphic that represents City Square? Hi, Meredith and Alexis. Can you hear me?
Hi, sorry. So I guess you didn't hear any of that?
No, yeah, it unfortunately didn't come through, so that's
Okay.
okay. We can address it again. Do you guys have like a graphic or a slogan or?
Yes, so City Square has a logo, and for all of the food pantry products, we have the logo with a little line underneath that says food. It's orange and has some dots and stuff. Kind of hard to describe, but yes, we have a logo.
That's very cool. I actually just found it. So I went to the website and I went ahead and shared that in the chat room that we have. So if you're looking at the bottom of your screen on the right hand side, you should see a little like comment bubble. If you click on that comment bubble, you can see that I have the link in there to City Square. And if you look on the top left-hand side of their screen, you can see their logo, and it is that square that's kind of orange and red. I do have questions, though. Do you guys stamp your products or like the bags you provide to the people in need when you're, or like your carts? I haven't been to City Square, and I need to get down there, but I'm just kind of curious as to how you guys are branding yourselves.
So for our meal program, we do have a label on it that has our logo. For items that we put out in our pantry, we just have a label. The logo is not printed on those items.
Okay,
And then
very. Go ahead.
otherwise, the logo is just on the buildings. As far as other items throughout the pantry, all of our products are donated. That's available. So we'll have logos from like Sprouts or Trader Joe's or Kroger. But as far as our own logo, that's just not something that we have the resources to put forward. It's more the branding of the physical location.
Oh, well, that's cool too, because there's this effect, and maybe you can help our audience understand if any of your the people that you serve those maybe with food insecurities or other needs develop place preference. So there's a classical conditioning effect where when people are getting certain access to those unconditioned stimuli that like food that yields those unconditioned responses, that place serves as the neutral stimulus that gets connected to the unconditioned stimulus and eventually becomes a conditioned stimulus. So the actual physical place and location of City Square can become a conditioned stimulus for the people that you guys serve. Do you notice any any of the people that you serve come in there and mention that they enjoy being at City Square and really like the place and are thankful for the services that you guys provide?
Yeah, a lot of the times because we get donations from unique places like Whole Foods and Trader Joe's, our neighbors recognize that those are some of the healthy options. So they do recognize we're not just giving them, I don't know, jars of peanut butter. We're also giving them rice cake snacks and edamame.
Fresh salad.
Yeah. So yes, to answer your question, we get that a lot.
And then adding to that too, as far as the place as a whole, where we're located we're really on the edge of South Dallas. So kind of going beyond just providing food, but providing a safe community for individuals to be during the day is unique to kind of the neighborhood we're in. People can come in and know that when they're on our campus, it will be a safe place for them. So I don't know if we've directly looked at that as kind of at the external stimuli. But I think that would be the hope for everyone on staff here, that for people who would see the City Square logo to think about like, oh, that place is safe. If they see City Square food, they'll think, oh, that's a high quality grocery store, a place you can get good food.
Oh, that's really cool because now we're not just talking about basic physiological needs being met. We're talking about another level of our needs that are being met. Melanie, can you enlighten us? What's that next level that Meredith and Alexis are meeting for people through their work at City Square?
Safety and needs, both safety needs, which is about personal security, employment, resources, health, and property.
Very cool. So we're going to kind of touch back on Maslow's hierarchy of needs. I know that that's not the central focus of this presentation, but we will come back to it because it was a focus in Janny's presentation from Vickery Meadow to our class. So we do want to kind of integrate some of Vickery Meadow's thoughts into this presentation. We're going to go ahead and move on to a different type of learning. And this is going to be learning by consequences. So we're going to introduce Edward Thorndike. So who was Edward Thorndike?
All right, Edward Thorndike was a psychologist born in 1874. He was considered one of the first to use experimental behavioral psychology, which was previously undiscovered. He's most known for his work in learning theory, which the most popular was his puzzle box experiments. He was also the first one to capture learning in the slope of a line graph. So basically, like a slope would determine the rate of learning. And his studies later defined the law of effect.
Okay, so Thorndike was interested in data and how behavior changes over time. That makes sense. It's kind of in line with our learning. I don't fully understand this puzzle box thing though. So can you kind of help me with that? Like, can you describe a puzzle box and how it might be used in tandem with food to understand our psychology and our behavior?
Okay, sure. So basically, like as you mentioned before, animals were like starved to 70% of their body weight for the experiments. So he did that with cats, and he had about like 15 different boxes, each with a different method of escape, such as pulling on a rope or pushing down a lever. So basically, he put a cat in a puzzle box, and he he recorded how long it took for them to escape using like the designated method of escape, such as pulling a rope or something. And then once the cat got out, they were rewarded with food.
Okay, so the cat was kind of hungry to begin with, and so there was some motivation there to acquire food. Could the cat see the food through the puzzle box? Like, did it know there was food on the other side? Like, if they could solve it?
Yeah, there's multiple windows in the puzzle box, so they could see the food through the puzzle box.
Okay, so they knew that there was like this like carrot or some for a cat it's probably meat, but there's some sort of like food reward on the other side that if they figure this out, they can get to it. Now, that first time they're trying to figure it out, does that go quickly or does it take some time?
It takes a lot of time. They try many different avenues, such as like trying to get through gaps or just clawing through the box itself. So it takes them a very, very long time to find the proper method of escape.
Okay, and Lewis, so once they find that method of escape, what happens on subsequent trials, on following trials?
On subsequent trials, the cat, now that the cat knows the method of escape, it'll immediately go and repeat that same method of escape, and then the the amount of time spent in the box is significantly lower.
That's pretty impressive. So I kind of wonder if the process of obtaining food at like Vickery Meadow or Mosaic Family Services or City Square is initially like a puzzle box for some people. Meredith and Alexis, can you kind of give us some idea about the process people have to go through to acquire food or even to learn about the services at City Square?
Yeah, definitely. So learning about services, what we're really finding is that it's kind of mouth-to-mouth advertising, I guess. So it's one person telling another person. So for us as an organization, it's important that we know that our neighbors that we serve are going to tell other people who are in need about the resources and the services they got at City Square, whether that's good or bad. So that's kind of our biggest, and we do outreach other ways as well, but that's just what we're finding is that people are hearing about us from word of mouth. And then once an individual arrives, this specifically at the food pantry to receive food, we don't want it to be a puzzle box situation, but it's just a short process. We don't require really any proof of need. Just kind of our idea is if you come to us and come to our organization and say that you're in need, we're going to take that at face value. That is a big deterrent for a lot of people. Just having to ask for help does put people off or having to admit that you need help with something so basic as food. And then once you make that step of saying I am in need, I need help with just groceries, we're here to make that a pretty easy process. But then it is faster every time. People are, if they have a good experience coming through and shopping at our pantry, if they're treated with respect, people will come back with the expectations of having, of having a good experience, but also kind of, I guess, with a better mentality as well, that this is a place you can come, be treated with respect, get your needs met, and tell people about it and kind of continue that cycle.
That's wonderful work. So what can we do um, as students and as faculty and staff at Richland College and in the broader community, what can we do to help simplify the puzzle box for people trying to be served by agencies such as City Square?
I mean, that's that's a really big question, I think, from where I sit. I think one thing that would really kind of take away the puzzle box is just to if we can talk about the need, really get rid of this stigma of asking for help. It's, we're over 10 years since the 2008 recession in the United States, but I think we're still seeing a lot of effects from that. People who were young college grads who really have never been able to get out from under their burden of student loan debt, who have degrees but are unable to make a living wage, or people who were homeowners but lost their homes in 2008, and it's still, like I said, just about 10 years later, and they're still not back to the place that they were. We're seeing needs where we didn't see needs before. So to take away from the puzzle box aspect is, I think, to make it not shameful to have to ask for help, to have to admit that you're at a place that you never expected to find yourself. And then kind of in the same vein as well, to look at what bigger problems are causing people to be food insecure, whether it's lack of affordable housing, whether it's lack of affordable health care, systematic problems in large cities that affect specific demographics. I think from where I sit, that makes a really big difference, just to talk about it as a problem.
Right, very good. We appreciate having you guys in the forum. We're certainly not done with our presentation today, but I do want to take a moment to formally invite you to visit with my class, and we can talk a little bit more at the end, so that you can talk with all of the students in my class and help them kind of better understand how we can disseminate and spread the word about City Square. So I would love to have you guys on campus at some point. And I believe John shared my email address with you guys. So if you guys ever want to come out, we're on campus. And you guys are free to come out on a Monday or Wednesday and talk with us if you're available.
Yeah, we would love that. I think we would love to extend kind of the same thing to you all and your students as well. If you kind of want to see the need and the need for just the basic needs in Dallas, we'd love to have everyone come out and volunteer at our food pantry.
Awesome, very good. Melanie, would any of you guys be interested in maybe going out to City Square at some point?
Yeah, I think we would be interested in going there and help.
Yeah, so we can definitely talk about that a little bit more and just kind of see how things flow. But yeah, send me an email and I'll talk with my class a little bit about maybe when we'd like to have you guys out, and maybe there might be some students that want to go down there and take a look. I know I'd like to come down there and take a look at City Square at some point, so I can get a better idea of how you guys serve our community. It sounds very interesting to me. The next researcher, and we want to segue into this, and I don't know if it was Meredith or Alexis that mentioned this, but you guys mentioned that the people that come out and get their needs met, they like to come back because they feel it was a fruitful experience, and for many of them, it's a new experience. And so one of those things, and one of the basic principles that we need to understand so that we're trying to move people into producing somewhat novel behaviors, is we have to understand the process in, for example, overcoming that shame. And so B.F. Skinner was one of those psychologists that kind of helped us understand that process of going from basic behaviors to more complex behaviors. And so I'm going to turn it back over to the students and let them provide us a little bit more information about B.F. Skinner. So who was B.F. Skinner?
Okay, so B.F. Skinner was born in 1904, and he's an American psychologist. He studied mostly behaviorism, and that's like what behaviorism is. It views like behavior in terms of like environmental stimuli. So like if something happened, like how we react and stuff. And he used operant conditioning in order to train rats to um, like turn around, and like he the way he did it was if they started to turn a little bit, he would give them food. And so if the rats would turn a little bit, he would give them food, but then he wouldn't continue to give them food unless they turned a little bit more. And so eventually, with this type of conditioning, they end up learning to turn all the way before receiving food.
That's kind of interesting. So I've seen like this skateboarding dog before. I don't know if anybody out there has seen like a skateboarding dog, but I remember seeing like videos of like skateboarding dogs, and I know that I've seen like animal trainers do some fabulous things with like dogs jumping through like hoops and over things and running through tunnels and stuff. Can you maybe describe like how you would go from a dog that, is just a normal dog to a dog that might be interested in hopping on a skateboard and going, by using maybe food?
So at first, you would give the dog, like, you would let the dog, you would put the skateboard in front of the dog, and when the dog got onto the skateboard or put a foot on the skateboard, you would give them food, or like a treat or something. And then you would continue this, like, as they slowly moved onto the skateboard, whether it was like one paw and then maybe two paws, and then maybe they eventually get on top of the skateboard completely. And then once they were on the skateboard, you would start backing up and holding food, and you wouldn't give them the food until they started like slowly coming towards you on the skateboard.
That's really cool. That's impressive. So you've got an animal that maybe you're trying to get interested in the skateboard. If they just come near it, you give them a treat. If they touch it, you give them another one. If they put a foot on it, you give them more. And you keep going until eventually the dog's hopping on there, and maybe it even becomes intrinsic to them. Like this is just kind of intrinsically enjoyable at some point. And it certainly appeared that way in some of the videos that I saw with like skateboarding dogs. I know you can find them on YouTube, so I encourage you guys to go take a look at those. But now let's go to something more complex like shame. Like how could we shape someone into, shedding their shame and feeling comfortable going to a place like City Square and asking for help?
I would, I feel like to shake that shame, you would have to, like, slowly introduce that. Like, maybe just bring them around the building and let them see like how it is, and maybe talk to other people. And then the next time maybe they can pick up one or two things and get comfortable with being like having that kind of help. And then slowly just like, without like pressuring them, like slowly just let them like get what they want, and just show them like how other people feel, and like have people support them and show that it is okay.
I think that's a pretty good point. So clearly, with Skinner's method of shaping, there appear to be like some limitations here. Like we have an animal, we're getting them to the point where they're turning or riding a skateboard or something with food. But when we start getting into people and some of these animals, there's social aspects to this, right? And there's cognition, and so if we can see other people enjoying um, their experience, then maybe that might help. And I've actually taken a look a little bit closer at City Square, and some of the first things I see when I enter into that website is I see smiling, happy people. Like that's a start. Um, I think that's like Steve Martin right there. I see like a smiling, happy person that makes me feel really good when I go to the website. And so that's like a first step, foot in the door. That's altering my behavior and altering my approach to City Square. So I think you're absolutely right. I think seeing other people experience good things and hearing good things, like they mentioned, word of mouth has been very fruitful for them. So if we can keep spreading that word here, and if you all that are in this audience can spread the word and share the link with your friends, that would really help out City Square. And Meredith and Alexis, feel free to weigh in if you think that's a good idea and that might be helpful.
Yes, that sounds like a great idea.
Right, so let's do that. Let's share that link. Once again, you can find it in the chat bubble, and you can, take a look and see their logo, see their icon, and go to their website and view some of the services that they have. We have just a couple more researchers that we're going to mention, and then we're going to kind of wrap this up. The next one we need to talk about is, who was Wolfgang Kohler?
So, Wolfgang Kohler was a German psychologist. His experiment consisted where he examined the monkey's abilities to reach food. So essentially, he used food as a motivator for them to try and either create a certain tool so they can reach out to it. And this essentially resulted in them improving their hardworking skills and their team working skill and their cognitive reasoning.
Okay, so these were monkeys, chimpanzee, like what were the participants or the subjects?
Chimpanzees.
Okay, so were they just like trying out new things and getting lucky, or did it appear that there was like some like mental simulations going on, and I mean, you mentioned collaboration, like how were they doing this together, and what did Wolfgang Kohler call it? Okay, I think I lost the students for just a moment. I can see that they're trying to reconnect. Just to kind of fill the void here, Wolfgang Kohler was interested in insight learning. And so one of the things that Wolfgang Kohler said about the chimpanzee is that the chimpanzee doesn't just learn things through trial and error, like we saw with the cats in the puzzle box. The chimpanzees will actually stop, take a few minutes, and look at their surroundings, identify the tools that they can use, and very carefully assemble those tools in ways that allow them to acquire their goal. And in this case, it was food. Um, Melanie, are you guys back with us?
Yeah, we're back.
All right.
Sorry
I
about
know it
that.
kind of kicked.
I don't know
Yeah.
what happened. It keeps kicking us out for some reason.
Oh, that's okay. Don't worry about it. Do you guys want to elaborate on insight learning, or do you guys want to move on to Tolman?
Elaborate on insight learning.
Okay, so let me present you with this question then. How did Wolfgang Kohler motivate animals to display those flashes of insight that come from, well thought out plans?
Essentially, there was that he would place them in like sort of for like a secluded cage, and then the food would be outside or like in another secluded cage, and they would have tools or a variety of instrument where they would have to make a tool that would be able to so they could be able to reach the food that was in the next cage.
Okay, and did they have to like just test it out, or did it appear to Kohler that they were in fact, simulating what might happen in their own mind's eye?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Yeah, so did it appear to like Wolfgang Kohler that these chimpanzees were just randomly testing objects as tools, or did it appear that they were able to kind of mentally simulate what might happen when using a certain tool, like a box to stand on, or like inviting a friend over to help out?
It appeared like if they were stimulating what they were processing, they were using a trial and error. So each time that they would fail, they would fail like during their trial, they would try it again, being more confident that of of their previous mistakes, so they could successfully achieve the food.
Oh, okay. So even though there was a little bit of trial and error, when they make a mistake, they would pause for a second and try to figure out how to resolve that, right? And so they were very quickly able to assemble tools and acquire food. And so let's talk about that mental simulation a little bit because that seems like it kind of requires memory, right? And so this memory is kind of one of those things that kind of gets in the way of things such as word of mouth, because if I'm in this forum today and this is my first time hearing about City Square, right? And I don't remember that it was City Square. I might think it was like City State or City Avenue or something along those lines. And instead of writing down the actual website, I might, just try to remember it. And then when I go and tell my friend about where they can get food, you know, I might get it wrong, or I might remember that it's in the wrong location. So let's talk about that memory and how that memory might relate to like cognitive maps. So who was Edward Tolman? And this is our last psychologist for today, and then we'll go ahead and wrap up our discussion. So who is Edward Tolman?
So Edward Tolman was also an American psychologist who was born in 1886. What he studied was cognitive maps, and he coined that term. And he also studied this term called latent learning. So what he noticed is he used an 8-arm radial maze, and what an 8-arm radial maze is, it's pretty much like a circle, and then it just has like 8 branches. And he would place food at the end of one of those branches and put a rat who was kind of hungry in the middle of the maze. And so while he was performing these experiments, he looked and see the number of arms they would check before finding the food, how many different arms they checked, the order they chose the arms, and like how long it took to find the food, and how long they paused before checking another branch. And so pretty much what he discovered is he used different types of mazes. Like he used the 8-arm radial one, but he also used like things like alley mazes, which just has like different pathways to the start, from the start to the food. And he would see like what they learned. So at the beginning, he wouldn't place food at the end of the thing. And he would just let the rat like run around and see like walk through the maze and see if there was a way to escape or anything. And then a couple of days later, he would place food into the mazes and see if they would be able to find the food. And what he discovered was through this thing that he called latent learning, that the rats actually did memorize the mazes and that they knew their way around, and that um, they just weren't presenting that they knew that until there was a reward at the end.
Oh, that's very interesting. So there seems to be some sort of um, representation of the physical world that ends up in the minds or the neural networks of these animals, and that seems to happen with humans too. Do you remember Tolman discussing anything like a broad cognitive map? So what is like a broad cognitive map? And then let's get to this like difficult question that we had. If latent learning can be produced through Tolman's broad cognitive maps and that experimentation, um, can the same effect be replicated in children and adult dieting? And then I want to add one more layer to this. So oftentimes in human societies, especially now, we aren't necessarily navigating a um a physical world. Sometimes we're navigating like a virtual world. Like I gave you guys a website to City Square, and you guys can find that down there using in the chat room by accessing it through the comment bubble. But we find ourselves like navigating these broad cognitive maps, like our social world, right? And sometimes these maps that are kind of like presented in complex ways through like websites and navigation. And so how can we be kind of creative in the way that we're using that to help children and adults with dieting, and maybe even to bring more people into the doors of City Square, at least help the people that really need it gain access to places like City Square and Vickery Meadow?
We can use these broader maps to understand how people think and like empathize with them. So maybe like make those like more comforting and welcoming places in order to make those people feel like it's a casual place to enter and like evoke some kind of emotional response with them.
Wonderful. I think that is an excellent way to wrap up. So we went from this basic behavior to something much more complex where we get cognition and emotion involved in the process. We're getting other people involved in the process because we are social creatures and that's important to us. And so we're seeing all of this kind of come together, and it's going to take all of your efforts to really spread the word about places like Vickery Meadow and spread the word about City Square and spread the word about Mosaic Family Services, because it really is word of mouth, and it helps to see other people that have already gone through that process. So if you're somebody that's gone through that process, please help provide people in need with information about that process so that we can get that out there to other people that are really in need. Um, I want to go ahead and open it up to any questions that people might have. I'm going to go ahead and keep recording during this time. We did start a few minutes late while we were waiting on some people to get in here, but I want to open it up to questions, and I also want to allow Meredith and Alexis to talk and state and make any other comments that they might have to our viewers today. So does anybody have any questions for our students? Meredith and Alexis, do you guys have any questions for us or have any other comments?
Not any questions we can think of right now. Some really good, good insight on kind of the theories behind a lot of actions we're doing. I think our last comments would be, we appreciate being part of this. We appreciate your willingness to share what we do with the whole community of Dallas. We would welcome you all to our neighborhood anytime you guys want to come down and tour, just find out more about what we do. But yeah, we just really appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah, absolutely. If you guys could email me some literature and some specific times that maybe would be good times to come down and visit, I'll see what support I can arouse, and we'll do our best to get down there.
Yeah, that'd be great.
All right, thanks. I'll monitor my inbox for that literature and kind of just be on the lookout for it. And then we'll probably extend an invitation to you two or to somebody else at City Square, whoever's available, to come visit with our students a little bit, because right now we have just a few of the students that specifically worked on this project in this forum, and some of the other students aren't here, and so it'd be nice to get them involved in it as well. Those other students will be involved in other forums, and we're going to have another forum. Melanie, when's our next forum?
We have a let me pull it up real quick. Sorry.
Is it on the 25th?
Yes, it's on the 25th, and we're going to be discussing The Language of Foods by Dan Jarofsky.
All right, wonderful. So you guys come back out next or on the 25th and be willing and ready to talk about languages associated with food, and maybe some of you have unique languages that you've developed around food. So we look forward to hearing that as well. And certainly Meredith and Alexis, City Square is invited back out as well. If that's not you, that's okay. It can be anybody else that might be available. We'd love to have you guys back out.
Thanks, we appreciate it.
All right, so I'm going to go ahead and end the recording here. I do want to go ahead and thank some of our contributors. So I want to go ahead and display to the audience right now. Hang on one second. Let me just pull this back up. Okay, I want to go ahead and share some of the websites with our audience that for our contributors. So we've got City Square. You can see the link right there. So if you want to take a picture of this screen or just make note, that'd be good. We have Vickery Meadow Food Pantry that has helped us out and been a big part of the process of stimulating the students' minds and getting them to think about the nutrition of food and how that affects the developing brain. We had Mosaic Family Services come out and talk about some of the psychological services that are offered at Mosaic Family and how none of those really work all too well if people aren't provided appropriate nutrition, if they're not provided those basic needs. And then the Learning Center has just been wonderful to us. They've helped us really market our outreach forums and our students. We need to really thank our students. They've developed a whole really a marketing campaign. It's excellent. We're going to have some marketing that's presented around campus on our monitors very soon. And we'll continue to get the word out into our community. They've got a YouTube page set up. They've got Facebook set up. Melanie, if you want to provide in the chat links to the Facebook page or Instagram, feel free to do so. If anybody's interested in that information, you can reach out to me. My email address is going into the chat room as well, so feel free to reach out to me. And if you're looking for service learning credit, you'll get an hour and a half of service learning credit for your participation today. But in order to do that, you must attend the entire event. So you guys that have remained with us, that's great. Send Tanisha Taylor an email. Email address is published on the slide and should be on your screen. It's Tanisha Taylor at dccd.edu. And then Tanisha will email you back some questions that you'll need to answer within a week, and you'll need to get that back to the Learning Center. I believe you can just walk it over to Medina. I think it's 216. You can walk it over there. If not, you might be able just to email it straight back to Tanisha, but it will get you an hour and a half of global service learning. And once again, remain involved in your community and spread the word about places like City Square, Vickery Meadow, and Mosaic Family. They need your help. All right, students, do you guys have anything else you want to add to our discussions today before we depart?
No.
All right.
Thank you.
You guys were awesome. I'll see you guys next week. Thank you for all your hard work.
Thank you.